Hey guys, welcome back. So today we're going to talk about steering. So we're going to talk about why I have this drag link in my hand, what happened, and what did I replace it with. So let's get after it. Hey, if you remember, the whole premise of this channel is to show you what a Gladiator can do in stock form with off-the-shelf parts. And that has really been the whole premise of this channel, is to see how far we can push this thing using OEM parts as much as possible. So that was my goal. Again, I wanted to show the everyday hobbyists that they can have a vehicle they can get out, have some fun with, and try to use as much of the factory components as possible. You know, less the bolt-on upgrades we all put on there, lift kits and tires, whatnot. So why am I holding my steering here? Well, this was the first thing to fail. And fail is probably a strong word because it really didn't fail. It just wore out a little quicker than I thought. And I'll explain. So the dreaded death wobble is what started this whole crusade, if you will. I started getting death wobble like crazy, and I didn't know what to do, so I started doing all my normal checks. And lo and behold, the steering stabilizer was completely damaged. It was beat up from the rocks because it hangs so low. And I took that off. It had no compression or rebound. It just was flopping around. So I ditched that and went with a relocation bracket to protect it and got a little heavier duty setup. Well, that was great, but it didn't solve my problems. So then I went through and looked at the control arm brackets, looked at the control arms and the bushings. I looked at the track bar bushings and the track bar. All of these were in great condition. So my last option was, well, let's get it down to the alignment shop. Let's see what they say. And so I took it down to Dixie 4-wheel drive. And the benefit of them versus, like, say, another big box car shop is that they are used to doing vehicles like this. And so they have the ability to really, they can even see if your axle's bent. So they put it on a rack. They came out and said, Drake, everything looks great except your tie rod ends are shot. So I said, huh. Now, that's surprising to me because I didn't really look at my tie rod ends, because the Jeep only had 13,000 miles. So I figured they should be good, right? Well, they weren't. And I guess that the weight of the tires, how I've been using the Jeep off-road, I guess it just prematurely wore them out. So I had an option. I could take the vehicle to the local Jeep dealer and have them replace them if they would. There's a possibility they could say, nope, you've modified the vehicle to the point that we're not going to replace it. Well, I didn't want to take that chance, but more importantly, if I did that, would I be replacing them in another 13 to 15,000 miles? Which I really don't want to do that either. That starts to get expensive as far as my time's concerned. What do we do? Well, we upgrade, and that's exactly what I did. The factory setup is probably, and you guys can correct me out there if I'm wrong, but the factory setup is probably about a 3/4 ton setup. Not quite a 1 ton setup. The factory setup was in good condition. The drag link and the tie rod, not bent, no dents, was holding up. The tie rod ends weren't quite up to the task. So I wanted to go with the 2.5 ton setup, and there's a couple of them out there, but I decided to go with Apex chassis. One of the reasons I went with them was that I liked the fact that I had an aluminum option, and we'll get into that a little bit more later. The other reason I chose to go with an aftermarket steering setup is this is the factory drag link. Let me flip it around. And this is exactly how it sits on the vehicle. This connects down to the knuckle. This connects up to the pitman arm, which the pitman arm is connected to the steering wheel. So when you turn it, this turns your knuckle, and then the tie rod helps with the rest of the steering. The problem is when you have 37 or 40 inch tires, after a few hard runs, you notice that your steering wheel is off center. And it's a very simple adjustment. In fact, you just loosen this bolt here, and it's not a very big bolt. And then you just turn this collar one way or the other. Have somebody in the vehicle watch as you turn the collar, and you can do it by hand, because that's how I've been doing it. And you can get the steering wheel straight. Then you just tighten this pinch bolt back up, and you're off and running. Well, if that steering wheel is always off, you constantly have that light, the warning light, the skid, anti-skid light that comes on. So that's kind of an irritation, and you don't want that. But I just got tired of always having to, after every run, get them to there and make the adjustment. I wanted to be done with that. So again, another reason for the heavy duty setup. This is what comes in the box. If you notice, this is a solid stock piece of aluminum that's been machined and tapped. So this is the completed system on the vehicle. This is what it looks like here. Now they have these little ninja washers on them, and I haven't folded these over yet. Once the alignment is done, one gets folded over this way on the tube, the other one gets folded over onto the tie rod end, right on the actual jam nut here. So what that does is it prevents this jam nut from backing off. And that is one of the downsides that you hear about there about jam nuts, about them coming loose. Well, the Ninja Stars take care of that. And with the Ninja Stars, it's a much stronger setup and a much, I guess, fail-proof setup compared to the pinch bolt system that the factory used. So guys, the install was fairly easy, just with common hand tools. In fact, I kind of laid them out here for you. Just basically a good torque wrench, a hammer, brass hammer would be better if you had it, tape measure, 22-inch box wrench, 22-inch socket, and some needle nose for those little pesky pins and the castle nuts. Anyhow, really straightforward. I'm not going to do a step-by-step install. However, if you want a really step-by-step video, his way of life, he does a great install on a drag link and tie rod using Synergy products. One of the things I thought would be fun is I want to show you the difference between this assembly and the stock assembly. And I brought some digital calipers here, just show you that. So looking at this one, this is the tie rod, and the drag link is identical. It's just over 2 inches. That's pretty stout, and that is a solid piece of aluminum here, right? Solid stock. And one of the reasons why I went with aluminum is aluminum has memory. Unlike chromoly or steel, once you bend it, it's bent. So before I measure the stock setup, I wanted to also point out that the aluminum setup, it's solid stock, where the factory drag link and tie rod, they're hollow. So the stock tie rod is about 1.5, almost 1.6. The drag link is the same. So quite a big difference between the two. I hope there's something that you can take away from this. I do want to mention that I could have done a drag link flip kit. The drag link flip kit mounts the drag link on top of the knuckle. And that's very simply done. You essentially just drill out the knuckle, drop in a little conical metal sleeve, and mount the drag link on top. And what that does is decrease the angle of your drag link here. The idea is, theoretically, the flatter your drag link and track bar, the less feedback you have from the road, the smoother the Jeep drives. That's something I still may do in the future. It's like a $20 part. However, if you remember, I really wanted to keep this vehicle as OEM as possible. Even though I'm upgrading parts, I'm still using the OEM locations. So let me make the mistakes for you. That way you don't have to. Apex Chassis didn't sponsor this video at all. Just like you guys, I'm blue collar, and I have to pay for all the parts I put on this thing. However, I do want to mention, if this channel ever got big enough to where a company out there wants to sponsor various parts, any parts I take off my Jeep that are worth value, I'll send to you guys for free. We'll just work out the shipping somehow. Because the sooner I get your guys' Jeep up and going, the sooner that you get to go wheeling with me. So anyhow, as far as the results, extremely happy with it. And I'll tell you why. Right now, the steering has never felt tighter. I don't have any feedback from the road, and that's probably because these 2-inch, big solid 2-inch pieces of aluminum absorb some of that feedback from the road, and so I don't feel it in the steering wheel. So the Jeep drives tighter, smoother. I have very little, if any, type of bump steer. That could be because of my steering stabilizer, which is adjustable. I keep it on about half as far as the setting is concerned, stiffness. It's been great, so no complaints. Thanks for hanging out with me today. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you so choose. I do want to say hello to my grandma. I love you. And Cynthia, thanks for taking care of her. See you guys out on the trail. Cheers.